Hello everyone. Welcome to the last session of the second day of our conference, which is a special session because we're not going to have presentations, but a film screening. And we have a distinguished guest to introduce the film. I'm very pleased to welcome Dr. Mateusz Werner, who is a film scholar and critic who has been closely following and writing about Polish cinema for several decades now, and he currently teaches at the University of Cardinal Stefan Wyszyński in Warsaw, and is the author or editor of several books about, among others, Polish cinema, Pier Paolo Pasolini or Krzysztof Krauze. Dr. Werner has published extensively in leading Polish and international film journals, and I think is really in an excellent position to contextualize the film for us. So I'll now hand over to him to briefly introduce the film Dług, The Debt by Krzysztof Krauze, and hopefully tell us why this is perhaps one of, or maybe even the most emblematic film of the Polish transformation. And after the film, we will also have some time for your questions and more discussion about what we saw. So, thank you.
Thank you very much for this kind invitation and introduction. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor and privilege to be with you today. Let me start this short introduction, short presentation with a brief description of a so-called bandit cinema current or genre, which significantly played a role in the 90s, in Polish cinema in 90s. This specific film genre, which developed in the most post-Soviet countries, just after the fall of communism. The first important example of this current was a film made by Władysław Pasikowski in 1992, entitled Pigs. I've heard from my colleague that this was a subject of the previous discussion. The film which you are going to see tonight in a while is a partially belongs to this bandit cinema current. And at the same time, it builds an interesting juxtaposition to the main characteristic of it. So what was exactly a bandit cinema in Poland in the 90s? The concept is very simple. It's a bloody and brutal gangster movie based on the idea that the familiar Polish car thieves and drug dealers are presented like mysterious godfathers of mafia, while the cops, most of them are the former secret police officers and militiamen, adopted a charm of Dirty Harry, of this noir-style American gangster movie. So the brutal reality of transformation in terms of rising organized crime is depicted in these films as a sometimes romantic, sometimes interesting from aesthetic point of view, fascinating duels between real men on both sides. The examples of this current, which I would like to enumerate those films because it goes through the all 90s. It starts with Peaks. It was an enormous success. It gained 300,000 viewers in the box office in the first year, comparing with average box office of 15, maybe 20,000 viewers. It was the winner of the market. So this success gave the pattern for other filmmakers. And then the copies, the clones of Władysław Pasikowski's Peaks followed immediately. Private Town by Jacek Skalski in 1995, Fast Lane by Jarosław Żamojda in 1995, Anger by Marcin Ziembiński in 1997, Sara by Maciej Ślesicki in 1997, Billboard by Łukasz Zadrzyński, extremely violent movie, 1998. This gangster-style films were so popular among the audience that it created its own soft version, comedy version. And for instance, Juliusz Machulski, a renowned Polish filmmaker, made a killer film in 1997, which was extremely successful. It gained 1.5 million. The audience was 1.5 million viewers. And so a Disney film company, American film company, bought rights for remake because they realized it was more popular among Polish audience than the Hollywood blockbusters. So it was a proof that the pattern works. Another example of this comedy gangster film is Jacek Bromski's It's Me the Thief film from 2000. So, but the real number of those films is much bigger. I enumerated just particular successful ones. Now, let me name some factors which played a role in creation of this genre. The first important factor was, of course, outburst of free market. With transition means capitalism for Poland. First of all, and what does it mean on the field of film? It means the competition with Hollywood blockbusters. So the Hollywood domination was the main problem for Polish producers and for Polish filmmakers. So they looked after the type of movie which could compete. They thought Polish gangster films could compete on the field. The second pattern, the second factor was the freedom of speech, another phenomenon which occurred after the fall of communism. It enabled producers and filmmakers to create extremely violent, brutal, and vulgar pictures, which were impossible to be made within the frame of communist rules. The censorship would not allow these violent scenes and scenes in which Polish cops are dying, are screaming, are escaping from hands of brutal villains. So the freedom of speech was also helpful in creating this genre. Last but not least, the very important thing was the real rise of organized crime at the beginning of 90s in Poland. This free market created competition among criminals as well. And at the same time, and the stake was much higher than in communism, you could earn millions of dollars smuggling illegal spirits from Russia or from elsewhere to Poland and bypassing the Polish fiscal system. So it created really a heat on the field, and at the same time, our criminal laws were liberated. There was a significant liberalization of criminal law in Poland, and the power of police has been weakened. Because strong police and harsh law, it was something which was in the memory of post-communist society, which was combined with the totalitarian dictatorship, of course. So if we want to have democracy, if we want to have a normal country, normal reality, we have to put police in place and make the laws more liberal. So that was the window of opportunity for criminals, of course. So the audience perceived these gangster films as telling true films, realistic films, films about real life, real conditions. And it was also advantage, of course. It was perceived as a real story. So the most important characteristic of all those films was that the sympathy of storyteller, of director, was on the side of criminals. That was the twist. Taken from American films, gangster films. Cops and criminals used the same methods. You couldn't tell who is the cop, who is a criminal. So the sympathy of the audience and sympathy of the storyteller was very often on the side of criminals. Fast Lane, the film Fast Lane, Młode Wilki, made by Żamojda, created a kind of new lifestyle, that it's fancy to be a gangster. To be a gangster, it means you are not stupid. To work hard in fabric, in industry, and earn nothing for it. It means that you are clever. You choose the right way of development, individual development. You have guns, you have fast cars, you have pretty girls. You are a talented young boy. That was the image of the gangster, which was spread with this current. And now I stop, and I jump to the film which we are going to see tonight, because it was made in 1999, at the end of the decade of transition, and partially it belongs to the trend, to the current, because you have gangsters, you have violence, you have bad guys, you have weak state. You cannot, you recognize from the film that the honest way will bring you nothing in terms of gains. Only bypassing the system you can win something for you. So those characteristics allow us put this film into the box of bandit cinema. But on the other hand, this film was a turning point in the whole current. It was successful, very much successful in terms of box office. It was recognized by audience as a very, very attractive film, and as well by critics. It has very good reviews. And it completely changed the whole landscape. Why? Because the first time in the whole history of Polish bandit cinema, the director took the perspective, told the story in the film from the perspective of the victim, not from the perspective of successful and happy and intelligent and funny and brilliant gangster, but on the perspective of scared, terrorized victim of criminality, of this organized crime, who has to defend himself in face of the weak state, helpless police, helpless law enforcement. The victims have to take their own fate with their own hands. So it was a kind of solidarity with the majority of population, because the real feelings of the audience, the real feeling of the population was fear. Normal people from the street, when they saw the gangster, they were scared to death and they hated this gangster. That was actually the first film which was realistic, which really depicted the strings of powers in the society. And it created enormous feedback from the audience. And now why we are talking about this film at this particular conference, because I think this film could be seen as a summarizing art piece, because it is a film artwork summarizing the whole decade. And this film, this particular film, had very heavy influence on the way how we memorize the wild 90s. It shows that the whole popular culture, which was successsul in commercial terms, was a kind of lie, was adaptation of American pattern style, gangster style, gangster movie style, but in terms of descripting the real situation, the real social situation of the majority of society, it was unrealistic completely. It was a fairy tale, which of course suited very well mafia guys, who I know it from the actor who played the main role in Pigs by Pasikowski, who told me that that screenings with his presence were attended by people from the town. They were really proud that they are on the screen, and they wanted to shake his hand, and they said, "Yes, you work a good job. You performed like we perform. Really, you are a good actor. You understand something." So, and this I was really scared when he told me that. I felt uncomfortable with this situation. And The Debt by Krzysztof Krauze puts things in the right frame, I would say, and tells the final truth about our life in the 90s. This is my thesis. If you think I'm wrong, please tell me after the screening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for staying with us. We have some minutes for some final questions and discussion to round up today, the second day of the conference. We saw a gloomy picture of the transformation, for sure. On the one hand, a picture, I guess, of a society where kind of daily life is working, right? So this is kind of already a transformation where initially the characters kind of have functional everyday lives, which are then disrupted by meeting this character who turns out to kind of upset everything. So I guess that's already a shift from the movie we discussed in the previous panel, psy, dogs, or pigs as it's translated, where I would say that the transformation was still very much not narrated on this level of everyday life. It was kind of, everything was happening in the realm of the exceptional. I don't know if this is something you would agree with, but I guess before I offer any more comments or give Dr. Werner the opportunity to say something more, I would like to ask if anybody has any questions.
Or opinions.
Or opinions, impressions.
Especially these which contradicts with my lecture, opening lecture, let's say.
Maybe you explain a little bit more about the social strata of the parents. That would be interesting. What is the social and the material capital of these people in the 90s?
Very important question, because for Polish viewer, it is obvious who those people are. For the foreigner, it might be not so clear. Those two leading personalities are young intelligentsia representative of young intelligentsia with also intelligentsia background. So that the father of the leading role, this guy who recites a Polish poem behind the table, is a iconic representative of so-called good family. Yeah. So this is very important for this particular movie, because normally in bandit cinema, crime happens among underdogs. You know, mafia people come from the bottom, and they follow and persecute people from marketplaces, from from this underdogs shift. And here you really see people who should be like Vorbild,
Role models.
role model for the future successful businessmen. They have a good idea, they have knowledge, they have know-how, they are after good college, they have network, contacts. The whole world is in front of them, invites for the success, and it appears it's not so obvious. The first hammer comes from the bank, of course. They cannot get a loan, this is something which contradicts the normal pattern of bandit cinema, because it shouldn't happen to them. They should get the loan, they should develop their business, they should earn more money, and they should build mieszczaństwo.
Oh, like the bourgeoisie, the middle class.
Middle class, yes, sorry for that. A middle class. And so if such things happen to those people who are signed for success and they have everything to win, then it's really bad. And this is indicator for the audience. Oh, these guys mean it seriously. I mean, this is the way how the director wins the attention of the audience, because the audience can really identify themselves with those main characters. Yeah.
Yeah, and if I may add to that, I also find it very interesting or significant how the film does this visually. So it's situated very much in this kind of middle-class milieu, and I think there are also many kind of visual signs that express this. You know, if you think about the fact this is the late 90s and the characters are drinking green tea, you know, this would have been something quite kind of aspirational at the time. And so I was just wondering...
They climb, they have some... middle class habits already. Yeah. These habits are establishing now. Yeah.
And I was wondering, in terms of the film's visuality, I think this is something that we haven't talked so much about today, but in terms of memory, I think it's really important. If we think about how films structure memory, how we remember certain periods, then obviously they do so in a visual manner. They give us images. Yeah. And my subjective impression was, you know, as somebody who lived through the 90s, but as a child, to be honest, that this film visually doesn't look dated. You know, the 1990s there already look kind of like the present, you know, in the sense, okay, the trams are a bit older, the cars are a bit older, but, you know, even the way people dress, it's not kind of, you know, purple blazers and flashy chains of this kind of bandit cinema of 1992. So I was just, and I wanted to add to that we had a very interesting comment earlier by Olga Gontarska, who also mentioned that the actual physical quality of the early 90s films was very bad, in the sense before they were digitized, you know, the actual tapes were also kind of a very, very poor quality, which added to a kind of also distinctive visual kind of identity of these films, that we can easily identify them today. Oh yes, this is from the 90s because the image is kind of grainy and maybe not so sharp. So I was wondering if you could maybe also say something about the kind of development of the visuality of these films of the 90s. How did this change over the decade? I wouldn't agree that all of them were so badly formed. The main collaborator of Władysław Pasikowski,
is one of the best cinematographers of that age. And the cast, actors, the career of Bogusław Linda started with Pigs, and here this film is significant for Chyra, Andrzej Chyra career. That was the moment, the turning point in his career.
He's the bad guy.
This is the bad guy, the gangster. His eyes, his icy eyes hypnotized the audience and frightened, of course. From the visual point of view, maybe the film which is not so well known was important, this Private Town by Jacek Skalski, because Linda, who performed the main character as well, the local gangster, behaved in a special way. He didn't pretend he comes from Sicily and he knows exactly how the Sicilian wine tastes, but he was very badly, very poorly clothed, and that was something. I mean, if we would watch this movie, we could immediately recognize this material reality, like clothes, like cars, like homes, apartments, furniture, and so on. Films like Sara by Ślesicki, again Bogusław Linda in the leading role, was unrealistic. It was more like a dream of a wonderful life of Polish gangsters. The same, but in a comedian manner, comic manner, was in Killer by Macholski. So it was different. I wouldn't dare to say that those films developed a special kind of optic in terms of visualization. I would rather say it developed typical narratives and typical characters. Yeah.
Olga, did you want to comment? Or I thought you were putting your hand up. Sorry.
But I've got 3 comments. So the first, I don't know if it's so the first is about the father, because this father is really important and interesting, a very complex figure, because we need to pay attention that from one side he recalls the poem, the romantic poem, and from the other side he's connected with the former regime, former officials.
Not former regime, a new regime. It is.
Are you sure? Because
yes.
Because the father, judging from his age.
No.
And the other thing is that still many high rank officials in 90s were
He's in age of Tadeusz Mazowiecki. He's in age of the leadership, political leadership, which took power after the breakthrough, and this official who says to Robert Gonera, to Robert Gonera, that greet your father from me. We were together in scouting.
Yes.
This is typical.
Well, for me, that's really not so obvious, because being in scouting is always also a part of.
No. It was not communist scouting. It was something else.
It was mentioned harcerstwo. That's not clear which one harcerstwo
it
was.
Yeah, but you don't recognize characteristics. It looks like first. Czarna jedynka, the black first scout group in Warsaw. There were certain circles. There were certain circles which, in Poland, in communist Poland, which cultivated the old habits, old ethos.
Yes, but here was mentioned only harcerstwo.
Yeah, but
So for me,
it is interesting. It is detail which shows something. Why I think this father didn't belong to communist harcerstwo. Everything was communist. It was a legal part of scouting. But typical apparatchik, typical communist party member wouldn't recite Adam Mickiewicz poem at the table. This is.
Are you sure?
Yes,
because
yes,
here
of course. It is
totally
something.
Opposition.
No. This is a question of representation. If the man who casted actors and wrote the script would like me to believe that this is the story about former communist who turned to be now powerful rulers, this father would be a fat guy in a very fancy clothes, and he would behave differently. It is the bank clerk, this woman who denied the loan to the guy, was probably. I'm not certain, but probably she comes from the former establishment, and now she's in the bank. These are nuances. Of course, we are talking about visual metaphors. It is not all written down, but my intuition, my nose, my eyes. That's how I read it.
I'm not alone, because now I cannot recall the name of the reviewer, but there are reviews that still claims that the father was somehow connected. And for me, it's only presenting that in cinema, in films of 90s, those shades of gray, that it's not black-white opposition, was really understandable for the viewers and visible still. So it's
what is important, that he wouldn't get this money without this connection. That's for sure. And this shows reality of transformation. There was no money just for a good project. You had to have a backdoor entrance in order to get money. But it is, for me as a viewer, as a person who remember 90s, it is obvious that the father is look at the number of books in his apartment. A typical communist apparatchik who was a party member, who made career in communist Poland, they didn't read books.
I don't agree.
Okay.
And I don't agree
It's your opinion,
from
of
my
course.
own experience.
I'm not talking about my experience. I'm talking about the way how they were depicted in Polish cinema. This is the difference.
Okay, so just for the conclusion, so for me it's just a complex and very interesting presentation that showed the reality in these different kinds of shades of grey, the complex situation of Polish society, that it's not so black and white. A short remark about those differences of how urban space changed, a little bit changed, and that's interesting to research, not totally, not like from the beginning of the 90s, but still. And about the equality, because Veronika mentioned that it was my remark on the quality of the films from the beginning of the 90s. I was talking not about the talent or about the value of a cinema, but the quality of tape, of sound, and the image.
The tape was not digital.
I know where that's.
Yeah,
but that's why this tape was even lower quality than in 80s.
No, I'm sorry. I cannot agree. You can see a grain if you have VHS tape on the big screen. If you use normal 35 millimeter regular tape, we didn't use Orvo or Russian tape in 90s. We used Kodak, and it had average quality like everywhere.
From my experience, I participated in the project connected with digital reconstruction of the movies, including pigs, dogs, psy. So that's from my experience, and what the experts that did that digital reconstruction told me.
Okay. So there were some more questions. So maybe can you pass the microphone to Saigun?
I have a question about actually this gender aspect of this film, and I think like the last time I saw it was like 10 years ago, and today though, like in this watching, I'm just struck by how this almost like it's a very romantic film in a way.
Yeah, that's
right?
true.
There is some kind of a romance here, and it's a very, very male film. At the same time, I mean, like the secrecy between them, women are more or less the same.
I agree.
All of them are the same, kind of like including the gangsters family, right? The relations.
Yeah, that's true.
There is a certain kind of a complicity in that way too. I mean, maybe this larger, like the relations. So much about honor, male honor, involved in like all of that. Do you like to say a few things about that?
I think this is why the film is so moving for the audience. It works because this intimacy of the main characters bring them to the audience, to the viewer. We know they are good people. They can love each other. They have plans. They want to have a happy family. They take care for them, for one another. They are good friends. They are loyal friends. They have real bonds, and they work hard. They have good ideas. They are positive people, totally positive people. Yeah. So this world, this family life. Let's say the backstage of the drama is depicted very in details, and it contradicts with the criminal story, with this final solution, with this final crime which they have committed. You should not forget that the script was based on a real story, which happened in reality. the final frames tell the story. And Krzysztof Krauze, director, was involved in public campaign, which has been organized for releasing those guys because they were jailed. And in public opinion, they were jailed unfairly because they did what everyone would did on their place, because the society was abandoned by the state. So, and the president of Poland pardoned those people, and the film was a very important part of this campaign. It was a highlight of the campaign. So, yeah, I think this is the reason why the film was so popular among different types of viewers, not just those who are popular culture oriented and want just entertainment, but also more sophisticated.
We're running out of time, but I did see a couple more questions, so let's just please keep it very brief.
Yeah, if I may, I just wanted to continue what the second just started in terms of gender, and I wonder what you think about this interpretation. Because what I see here is a classical triangle between the good guy, the bad guy, and a woman. Yeah, and it can be even several triangles. And this is classical in the sense that it is present in many productions of the transitional period.
Excuse me, I don't get it. Where do you see the triangle?
It's more metaphorical reading. So the bad guy, the gangster here, the bandit, targets here, of course, not directly, but he hints at the fact that he may attack the girlfriends of both guys. And so that is one of the threat, and that is one of the reasons that these main characters push away their girlfriends. Yeah. So in other novels, films, such attack might be direct, might be leading to rape, and so on. So basically, the good guy and the bad guy fight. They fight each other, but there is also a woman, an object of desire involved here. Yeah, so, and this woman might stand for the nation very often. Yeah, so it might be a representation of Poland. Again, so...
Who? I don't get your, the full picture of your analogy. Who represents Poland in your view? I'm not interpreting maybe even exactly this film. I'm saying that it is a version of a triangle involving two men and a woman might be a representation of a nation. That's what we get very often in literature, film, and so on. Yeah, whether this applies to this film, I don't know. What you usually have in these plots, and I would call it a transition plot, that it ends at the point when the good guy becomes a killer, gangster, and so on. Yeah, so he becomes a perpetrator, and he starts becoming a perpetrator the moment that he abandons the woman or the woman leaves him. So he becomes dehumanized, desocialized by losing this contact to his female partner. Yeah, and this is what we see in this film, definitely. But what is interesting in this film is that there is a continuation. So the good guy turned into a perpetrator after the woman has left him. But then the woman returns to him and actually wants to pick up on the relationship. But this is also what makes him vulnerable, and that can be seen as a push for him to report to the police. Yeah, so that is an interesting twist in the end in the classical triangle plot. Thank you very much for this explanation. Yeah.
I don't know. That's just I'm thinking as I'm watching.
Maybe you're right. Yeah.
Any final questions? Yes.
Very short question.
Yeah.
Yep.
A yes or no question.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's somehow a documentary film, and at the same time, it's a very moral film. But it's not. There are no visible signs of religion, as far as I have seen. Is this typical for the movies of the 90s?
For bandit cinema, yes.
Okay. Mm.
For bandit cinema. In bandit cinema, you have no place for the priest. Maybe at the graveyard, you know. They.
A cross or something like that.
Why? I don't think. You know. No. I don't recall any. I don't recall actually any film from this current with the role of the priest. Although it could be a nice film.
For example, the elephant could have been a cross. Yes, the symbol.
Ah, yes, okay.
Yeah, but it wasn't. Is this significant or not significant?
Yes, you focused on this particular detail, and now I think it is meaningful. But I don't think that the audience have read it this way. That why it is the elephant and not. There are certain moments where you get the cross on your necklace. If you go for the first communion, maybe there are certain moments in your life, in your Catholic life, typical Catholic life, when you get this as a present. And I cannot imagine that this type of guy, a young businessman, gives his future wife a cross as a sign of love. This would be very unusual. But it doesn't mean that Krzysztof Krauze consciously erased this sacrum signs from the visual space, meaning he's against the church, or he manifests his atheism or something like this. I don't think so.
You understand my question? It's a super moral film.
Yeah, this is true.
At the same time, it's without
religion. But this is more like Kantian morality, you know. The last moment, it is his categorical super consciousness orders him to phone the police. It doesn't. There was a big debate why he finally calls the police, because the behavior of his fellows looks much more rational. But this is a sign of that there is a law and order in society. There is something like common sense of what is right, what is wrong, and this guy has a spin for this, and that's why this film was perceived by this conservative, let's say, part of public opinion in Poland as a very good film. It was praised for this message, of course.
Okay, well, I'm afraid that we have run out of time now. So thank you very much for joining us and for your comments. Thank you everyone for staying.
And for your stay.
Good night.